The Muslim Brotherhood has said that we are going to conquer the West through three means. We're going to conquer the West through the womb of our women. We produce 5.2, you're too lazy and you produce 1.2. Inshallah, in 70 years, we flip you all. Number two, we will conquer you through hijrah, through immigration. Yalla, millions come in, no problem. Number three, we will use your miserable freedoms against you. You arrest someone who is Muslim, but why, Allah, why are you Islamophobic? Well, no, it's not because I'm Islamophobic, it's because you the girl that I arrested you, Muhammad.
Today we have a very important guest, someone whose work has shaped the way millions of people think about culture, ideology, and the future of the West. Dr. Gad Saad is a professor of marketing, an evolutionary behavioral scientist, and the best-selling author of The Parasitic Mind, a book that explains how dangerous ideas spread, like mental parasites, and damage our society from the inside. He also wrote the upcoming book Suicidal Empathy, where he shows how blind compassion and political correctness can actually destroy a nation's ability to survive. This interview is not about hate. It's also not about attacking people. It's about protecting freedom, protecting Western values, and understanding the reality we are facing. So sit back and get ready for a powerful discussion with Dr. Gad Saad. Let's begin. Gad, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure to be with you, Sahar.
To the people who don't know, Gad is actually one of my role models when it comes to, first of all, content creation. The way you speak is phenomenal, and we also have some sort of common ground. Gad was raised in Lebanon, just like my grandmother, who was also raised in Lebanon and then smuggled inside a pot into Israel because of violence towards our family. Her parents were actually born in Syria, but that's the common ground we have, and that's why both of us look as good.
That's right. I've been told that you are a very good-looking guy, and I now confirm this to be true.
Beautiful. I would love to hear your personal story, how it all began, what it was like growing up for you in Lebanon.
Right. So I was born in Lebanon, grew up there till the age of 11. Of course, Arabic is our mother tongue. At home with my parents, we spoke Arabic. Even when we moved to Canada, we spoke Arabic. We listened to Arabic music, Arabic culture. Of course, there was one small problem, is that we were Jewish. And so while much of my extended family had already left Lebanon by the start of the Civil War in 1975, my parents had steadfastly refused to leave. They refused to read the warning signs everywhere because they were very well entrenched within Lebanese society. Then when the Civil War started in 75, it became very, very difficult, if not impossible, to be Jewish. And so we had to leave. But then oftentimes people ask me, okay, so prior to the Civil War, was it all beautiful and perfect and rosy in Lebanon? And the short answer is no. People usually construe Lebanon or old Lebanon as, the Paris of the Middle East, and it's a place of tolerance and progressivism and so on. I mean, the answer is yes, but in the context of the Middle East, right? We tolerate you until we decide not to tolerate you, right? You're safe until you're no longer safe. Just like a heart attack, right? You're walking and jogging and you're perfectly healthy, and then, oops, you're dead. And so that's really what happens to usually all dhimmis in the middle in Islamic lands. Dhimmi, for your viewers who may not know, is a Quranic concept, an Arabic term that refers to religious minorities that are not even second class, third class citizens under Islamic rule. Look how nice we are as Islamic overlords. We tolerate you and we don't kill you, and you just have to mind your business. Don't show your identity too much. Be quiet, and hopefully you'll live peacefully while we protect you. You see how nice we are? And so, of course, eventually that your welcome always runs out, and then you have to put on really good running shoes and outrun those who want to behead you. But I discuss in The Parasitic Mind in the first chapter so that people get a sense of what it is to grow up as a religious minority in the Middle East. I explained how endemic Jew hatred was, even in a place like, quote, modern Lebanon. So I tell the story of when that was probably the first time that I ever saw or I remember Jew hatred when Gamal Abdel Nasser in 1970, the Egyptian president, passed away. He was really revered in the Middle East because he was a pan-Arabist. He's trying to unify all the Arabs into one group, and so he was loved even, of course, in Lebanon. And when he passed away, as often happens in the Middle East, people take to the streets and they scream and they protest and they lament and so on. And as they were coming down, in the hundreds, if not thousands, down our street, they were screaming, death to Jews. And so I'm a 5-year-old boy and I'm looking at my mother, I'm saying, well, why are they screaming death to Jews? And she's like, shh, be quiet. Don't put your head up on the balcony, stay quiet. And so that was my first exposure to Jew hatred. And this was in 1970. We're still very far away from the Lebanese Civil War, which would only happen 5 years later. Another time I was maybe 8 or 9, so about a year or two before the start of the Civil War, the teacher asks everybody in the class to get up and tell the class what they want to be when they grow up. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a policeman. I want to be a soccer player. And a kid gets up who knows that I'm Jewish because we've been in the same class for many years, gets up and says, when I grow up, I want to be a Jew killer. And everybody laughs and claps. Now, these seem like banal little incidents, but it gives you a sense that within the DNA of these societies, it is perfectly banal and okay to exhibit Jew hatred. Now, that doesn't mean that every second of every day you were being attacked for being Jewish, but you certainly, knew that you were biding your time. I'll tell one other quick story, and then we could come back to it if you'd like. One of my brothers was a Lebanese judo champion for many years in Lebanon, and this is before the Civil War. And he was visited by some men at one point who explained to him that it was time for him to retire because we wouldn't want some unfortunate accident to happen to him. Because of course it's shameful for a Jew to be winning all these championships in the Middle East. Of course, he didn't want to accept this, so he ended up moving to France to pursue his judo career and his studies. And in 1976, he joined us in Montreal when we had emigrated. That year, the Montreal Olympics were happening. Well, the Olympics were happening in Montreal. So he ended up representing Lebanon in the Olympics in judo. So 3 years earlier, he suffered from the terminal disease of being Jewish. And 3 years later, we will forgive the fact that you're Jewish as long as you wear the Lebanese flag. So that's the world that I come from.
Why do you think there's this ridiculous Jew hatred in places like Lebanon, which was, I assume, majority Christian at the time you lived there, right?
Yes, it was very much Christian. It was about 2/3 Christian. And then within 40 years, it flipped to the exact opposite. People think that it takes 500 years, 1,000 years for now, of course, admittedly, it's a small country, 3-4 million people, but it didn't take 100, 200 years for the demographics to shift. Within my lifetime, it has completely shifted to an Islamic majority country. Why? Look, there are many reasons for Jew hatred, but I offer a psychological explanation that transcends. I mean, there are Christian theological reasons why the Jews are hated. There are, of course, endless Islamic doctrines for why you should hate the Jew. But it transcends that even, right? Because there are people who are not very wedded to their Islamic faith or their Christian faith that also will exhibit huge Jew hatred. And so I offer the following psychological explanation. There is a phenomenon in psychology called the self-serving bias, whereby when you're trying to attribute successes and failures in your life, you attribute successes internally and failures externally, right? So I did well on the exam because I'm smart and I studied hard. It's because of me. On the other hand, if I did poorly on the exam, it's because Professor Saad is a bastard and he's unfair,
Gotcha.
right? And so it's a very natural instinct for people to have because it protects their egos. Now, imagine if I have an external culprit for all of my failures, whether they be individual level failures or societal level failures. It's the Jew. And that is literally the case. If it today rains outside, it's the Jews who control the weather. If my wife cheated on me, it's probably she learned about this by watching porn. And who creates porn? It's the Jews who create porn. Your child just came out in Detroit as transgender. Who created the transgender movement? It's the Jews. Now, it doesn't matter whether that's actually factually true or not. We don't have to worry about facts, but we can very comfortably blame it on the Jews. Now, the question then becomes, but why the Jews? Why aren't all the external attributions put on Armenians or on some other group? Well, it's because throughout history, there's been one recurring pattern to Jewish realities, which is they're always an extremely small minority and a much larger majority, and they always punch way above their weight class, right? So they make up point whatever 2% of a society, but they make up 40% of all physicians and philosophers and music conductors and professors and so on. So therefore, as I'm navigating the world as a non, if I were a non-Jew and I fail at something, and then there is a very clear reality that a very tiny minority seems to be overtly successful, then it becomes a very easy thing for me to say, those effing Jews, they truly are diabolical.
So I'll tell you what my opinion is about why Islamic people, Islamists hate us. And tell me what you think, because I am interested. How can you love a group of people who was able to reclaim their ancestral homeland, revive the Hebrew language, pray next to Temple Mount? I'm not saying on top of, because we can pray on top of Temple Mount, next to Temple Mount. And it's pretty much not giving legitimacy to the religion you call the religion of truth. You know, they called the Jews the din batils, the canceled religions, and they called the Christians the din batils, the canceled religions. How can you be din haq, or the truth of religions, if you have the OGs of monotheistic religions just thriving and reviving the Hebrew language? And then they start making up these conspiracies and saying we did 9/11 and we killed JFK and all these crazy conspiracies to support these claims. But it's, to me, it binds completely to a theological perspective from on their behalf.
Oh, I'm 100%. Although what you just said, while it is true that the fact that the return to the ancestral land, the revival of Hebrew as the language, those things are true and can certainly explain the Jew hatred from 1948 onward. But the Jew hatred has existed for 1400 years, well before what you just said. But to your greater point, precisely because of the theological doctrines of Islam, right? So Muhammad starts off in Mecca and he preaches a very nice message. You have your religion, I have mine, no compulsion in religion. Wow, it's beautiful. He's a hippie. He's so kind. Then he does hijrah. He goes immigration to Medina. Like any good marketer, he tweaks his selling message. And now his message becomes one that's a lot less tolerant. And that appeals to a lot of men who say, yeah, okay, sign me up. When he was in Mecca, he was trying to proselytize for many, many years, and he was very unsuccessful. He moves to Medina, he changes his message, and suddenly massive groups of people signing up into the club. Well, all of the groups fell into line, except there was one group who said, sorry, Muhammad, we're good. No, not for us. And so that was a big affront, because there was this one group of folks who simply refused, irrespective of what you threw at them, to convert and accept you as the final messenger of God and blah, blah, blah. And so on his deathbed, he said, promise me that you will rid Arabia of the Jews. And so it's not as though it's very difficult to find the canonical reasons for why Islam hates the Jews. I mean, what is incredible is that 1,000 years ago, it was very difficult for people to access. Most people were illiterate. Most people can't read the Torah, can't read the Quran, can't read the Hadith. We now have this thing called Google, where you can actually go and check these things for yourself. Notwithstanding that they try to sanitize the stuff, you don't have to listen to Gad Saad. You can just go and check it for yourself. Does Islam, purports a message of love and tolerance, or it doesn't? Well, I would argue that there is almost no data that you could think of that is as clear as the answer to that question, and yet most people are bafflingly ignorant about the realities.
Can you give us a small explanation before we move on? What is the definition of jihad? And is jihad always violent, or could it be translated to more, educational stuff or other things? What is jihad? What is the definition so my viewers can understand?
Yes, of course, if I were to answer it now as a Islamic apologist, this is the answer I would give.
Okay.
There is a greater jihad, there is a lesser jihad. I'm putting on weight and I have to stop eating French fries. And so that's part of my internal struggle. I'm calling a jihad against succumbing to eating too many French fries because I'm getting fat. That's what they will tell you. And that there's only one part of that is understood to be as the violent proselytizing of everybody else to conform to the glorious, true, noble faith, right? But everybody, and if they are in the least bit honest, understands that jihad is the goal of Islam. Look, any religion, any ideology is made up of a set of doctrines. In the same way that DNA has certain instructions to carry out life, right? Or a computer program. If you wish to solve this particular problem, here's the computer program. You put an input, it gives you an output.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to understand what are the fundamental drivers of Islam, we don't have to guess. We don't have to listen to your professor of Near East Studies at Columbia University. We can go to the original text and study what it says. Well, Islam technically is a religion of peace. Let me explain what it means by that. We are going to have peace when the entire globe, every inch of the world, is united under the unifying flag of Allah, in which case we will have peace because we will all be noble Muslims. So in that sense, it is seeking peace, except there's a small asterisk. In going to that peaceful end result, we might have to kill a couple of 100 million people, but actually we were very kind because we did put the sword to your head and made you a very compelling offer. Either convert or live as a dhimmi or lose your head. So it's not as though we didn't give you many alluring options. And there is 1,400 years of history of that, right? Israel is a colonizer, which of course it isn't. But imagine Islamic people are telling Israel that it's a colonizer when Islam is the greatest colonizer in the history of recorded world, right? There are 56 current countries that are part of the OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation. These 56 countries that constitutes a very large territory of the world, that constitutes 1/4 of humanity, right? Each of those countries, once upon a time, had 0% Islam. Then you closed your eyes, you opened your eyes, and depending on which country, it's 99.9% Islamic. It's 100% Islamic. How did that happen? Is it always because we threw around sweets and we just engage in peaceful dialogue? No. And so it'll be well worth it for people not to just trust what I say. Go do your homework and come to your own conclusions.
What would you say to people, and I talk to a lot of people about this, who tell me, listen, Islam needs to take back lands that they used to own, but now they're owned by Christians who took it back, or Jews who took it back. What would you tell to people who say they're not planning to do this in the United States? They're not planning to do this in Australia. These lands were never conquered by Muslims. Therefore, they're not Islamic for eternity, just like they claim about Israel and Al-Andalus. What would you tell to these people?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Al-Andalusia because that's a typical example I use to explain the concept of Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam, right? Dar is like the salon, okay? So there is the house of Islam, and then there's the house of war. Any land that is currently Islamic is under the dominion of the house of Islam. any land that is not under the dominion of Islam is literally, canonically under the House of War. Now, that could come in one of two forms. It could come in the form of a country that we've never conquered, Australia, but I'll show you how they actually even play games there. Or places that were under our dominion, which we have since lost, which then becomes a theological injury, and we have to gain it back. So yes, Israel might have been the ancestral land of the Jews, but for a very long time it was no longer under Jewish dominion. And as a matter of fact, there were, of course, periods where it was Islamic rulers that ruled that land. Therefore, theologically, when they say it is ours, according to their theological text, that's perfectly true. Andalusia, which is in current Spain, was conquered by the Moors et al., and therefore it belongs to them. Now, Australia and United States, technically, you may think they haven't been conquered by Islam, but they always come up with ways to demonstrate how they are the true original indigenous people of that land. So, for example, did you know that California is Caliph, right? It's the caliphate. So is that a surprise? That proves to you that the word California comes from the Arabic caliph. It looks as though I'm joking, but that's literally a position that's been taken. Or, in 1632, I'm making up the exact date. It's hypothetical.
All good.
There was Sulam Muhammad Ahmad al-Kbir, who came on a slave ship to Boston. So the original indigenous people prior to Americans, prior to, the founding fathers, were actually Islamic. So it is not out of place to really say that United States was really founded by Muslims. So while we technically never really owned United States, it really is within our dominion. Right now, today, the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE and so on in the United States make these types of arguments. So it is absolutely insane. And if people don't wake up, it won't be 56 countries in the OIC. It'll be a lot bigger number than 56.
Oh my God. Which is leading me to my next question. You finished the book Suicidal Empathy, correct?
I did. I finished it. It's now with the publisher, and people are extremely excited by it, but not as excited I am to have it in their hands. So it should be a good one.
I'll get it for myself as well, of course. Please tell me more about this book. What was the idea behind this book, and how do we implement it on today's reality?
Yes, thank you for that question. So it really is a slightly longer story. So let me backtrack, and then I'll come to suicidal empathy. So my original training as a academic, as a scientist, was in applying evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology to study human behavior, right? What are the biological underpinnings that make us do the things that we do? How do our hormones affect our economic behavior? How does the menstrual cycle of women affect their food behavior? Okay. And so I was marrying biology, psychology in specific behavioral fields. And very quickly in my academic career, I started noticing that many of my social sciences colleagues were very hostile to what I was trying to do, because they were arguing that no, biology and evolutionary theory applies to the dog, it applies to the giraffe, it applies to the mosquito. But surely, Professor Saad, you don't think that consumers are biological beings? Surely not. We are cultural beings. We transcend our biology. Biology matters for your dog, Fido. It doesn't apply to higher order beings like us. Or if we concede that evolution matters, it stops at the neck, meaning that it might explain why we have opposable thumbs. It might explain why your lungs are shaped the way that they are. But surely you can't use evolutionary theory to explain the human mind, Professor Saad. Well, of course you can, right? The human mind didn't come out of magic, right? It wasn't an abracadabra. So that was my first exposure to how perfectly reasonable and educated people could be parasitized by bad ideas. How is it that people could be hijacked by ideology when they're called professor and doctor? Right? So that was my first exposure. And over the next 30 years, I saw the attack, the war on reason that was happening on university campuses. So that led to my writing my 2020 book called The Parasitic Mind, where I was arguing that in the same way that many animals, including humans, could be parasitized by actual brain worms, right? So, for example, a wood cricket, an actual insect, the wood cricket, it detests water. But when it is parasitized by a hairworm, the hairworm needs the wood cricket to jump into water to commit suicide because it needs to complete its reproductive cycle in water. So once that poor wood cricket is parasitized, it is hijacked. Now it is the hairworm that is controlling its behavior all the way to the point of suicide. So you'll
Wow.
see how I come to suicidal empathy. So then I argued in the parasitic mind that human brains could not only be parasitized by physical brain worms, they could be parasitized by ideological brain worms. And so I describe all those idea pathogens, and then I offer a mind vaccine to protect yourself against the hijacking of your capacity to think. So parasitic mind explained what happens to our cognitive system when it is parasitized. But we are also a feeling animal. We are both a thinking and a feeling animal. So if I want to fully hijack your ability to think, I also have to hijack your emotional system, hence my forthcoming book, Suicidal Empathy. And so here, let me now explain what suicidal empathy is.
Please.
So empathy, already there's been many articles that have been written about my forthcoming book, even though the people haven't read it, because only one other person has read it, and that's my editor at the publisher. So they couldn't have read it. I'm not the type of guy who just shares my book with 1 million people to read and give feedback. So I'm very, very possessive and territorial and careful. So they couldn't have read the book, but yet they're already writing articles saying, look at the evil, diabolical Jew who is behind Elon Musk, because Elon Musk is a fan who often will talk about these concepts that I discuss. And they say the evil, demonic Jew is trying to create a dark world where empathy no longer applies, which is, of course, couldn't be any more incorrect. I'm the first to say, as an evolutionary psychologist, that empathy is an evolved capacity. It's an adaptive trait. It is part of the human condition to be empathetic because we are a social species.
Yeah.
So for me, you and I to have a meaningful conversation, I have to put myself in your mind. That's called theory of mind. For example, autistic children, the way we diagnose them as being autistic, there is no blood test you can give to know that your child is autistic. You usually give them a theory of mind test, which they fail, meaning that they don't have cognitive empathy as a symptom of their autism. Okay. So it is perfectly laudable and beautiful to be empathetic. But 2000 plus years ago, Aristotle explained to us that all good things in moderation, right? Life is about finding the sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
Too little of something is not good. Too much of something is not good. And for most phenomena, the optimal is somewhere in the middle, right? So empathy is fine as long as it is applied in the right amount, in the right situation, to the right targets. If that breaks down, you end up with suicidal empathy. And that's exactly what my next book is about. It looks at a bunch of domestic policies and foreign policies, and it argues that they all stem from the same singular cause, suicidal empathy.
Speaking of empathy, and I speak about this all the time, the reason why I think the Israelis, the Jews, why we're losing the propaganda war is because we're not empathetic enough. We think that if we show reasoning and logical facts to people around the world, that will make them align with our point of view. On the other side, we have the Palestinians and the Arabs and the Muslims of the world, who all they show to the world, all they show is dead children and dead women and dead elderly and blown up limbs and all these things. And people, if they have to choose, and I've read this in a book of Mehdi Hassan, saying if you present a logical argument and nine out of ten, the 10 things that you will present to me are factual, and then I will debate you and I'll present mostly emotional aspects, I'll beat you every single time. Because
100%.
people don't reason with logic, they reason with emotion. And that's why I think the Israelis and the Jews are not so good at explaining to the world what's actually happening, because we're not showing the empathetic side. I don't know if that's exactly what your book is about, but it just touches it a little bit, in my opinion.
I mean, I'm not using empathy in the way that you're using the term, but the gist of your argument is exactly right. I recently had the former director of the Mossad on my show.
Oh, wow.
And and further supposedly proving that I am the real true head of the Mossad, as everybody on the internet says. Apparently, for the past 32 years, I've been faking pretending to be a professor. That's just so that all of the gullible people can actually think that I'm a professor. But my real job is that I am orchestrating the Mossad from my home in Montreal. That's the kind of stupidity of people. But anyways, I was speaking to Yossi Cohen, and I told him, the Israelis are, to your point, the Israelis are fantastic with their commandos and the Air Force and the intelligence and the Mossad. But when it comes to winning in the propaganda war, boy, do you suck, right? So to your point, and that, by the way, I think I dare say that I understand it a lot better than even most Israelis who live in the Middle East, because they're not as well versed in Arabic culture as I am, right? So, and this, by the way, is something that I talk about in Suicidal Empathy, so I might be able to join some of its content with what you were saying. So I introduced the term in Suicidal Empathy called cultural theory of mind. So theory of mind is me being able to put myself in your mind in order to be able to have a good exchange. Cultural theory of mind, I argue, is the same phenomenon, but at the cultural level, meaning, so I argue that the West lacks cultural theory of mind, because when they exhibit kindness, compassion, tolerance, empathy towards folks that come from those regions, they think, because they lack cultural theory of mind, that the recipient of that kindness and empathy will say, "Thank you, Habibi, I really appreciate it. Let me now reciprocate." No, they read it as compassion, weakness, empathy, weakness, kindness, weakness, magnanimity, weakness. So that's why we're talking in parallel to each other, because every act that I do, you are interpreting it in a completely different way. And I hate to say it, I think in many instances, the Israelis suffer from the exact same lack of cultural theory of mind, right? If we only do the life-saving surgery on Sinwar and save him, I mean, he was going to die a horrible death. I now come in, the dirty Jew, neurosurgeon, and I save you. Any sense of humanity would say, if nothing else, I have now bought your reciprocal kindness, your reciprocal appreciation forevermore, right? Many people who hated the Jews meet Jews, go to dinner with them and say, "Oh my God, I was always taught that Jews are monsters, but now I know better." But Sinwar didn't do that autocorrection, right? And when he was saved, he said, "Perfect. I will now repay you by killing more of you." That's because lack of cultural theory of mind. So all this to say, your intuition is exactly right, Sahar.
If you would be the Prime Minister of the United States or of Canada or of the United Kingdom or France and all these countries that are slowly importing more Islamists from different countries and just allowing it to happen, what would you have done to change the situation that's currently going on as a leader?
Well, I would certainly have never allowed the immigration patterns to be in the form that they took, right? I despise having to always do this preface, but I will do it for the imbeciles who might not otherwise understand. Most people of any group are perfectly lovely. There are really nice Jews and there are pedophile Jews. There are really nice Muslims. There are really mean Muslims. There are nice atheists. There are mean atheists. But we're not talking about individuals. I know more. I receive thousands of fan letters from Muslims, actual Muslims who hear everything I say and they love me. So this is not an attack on individual Muslims. Your friend Ahmad, who is gay and is married to a Jewish man and eats pork, is not the representation of true Islam, right? Islam is a set of doctrines. Therefore, we can look at history and say, when Islam comes into a new society, a society that had heretofore not been under Islamic majority, one of three things can happen, as I explained many, many times before. Before I do that, let me analogize. When you go on a diet, you take a certain set of actions. So you eat less, you exercise more, and at the end of the day, your weight, if that's the metric that you're following, your weight can only have one of three things happen to it. Your weight could either have gone up that day, it could have stayed exactly the same, or it could have gone down. Yes? There is no other possibility.
Right.
So let's apply this analogy to Islam. If more Islam comes into a society, only one of three things can happen. There could be more love towards the Jews, there could be no change of love towards the Jews, or there could be a lot less love to the Jews. So when we let in millions and millions of people in Sweden, in France, in Denmark, in Italy, in Spain, in Britain, in Canada, did we need fancy Professor Gad Saad to explain to us what would likely happen with Jew hatred? Because now all the politicians are going, I don't understand where this Jew hatred is coming from. What could explain it? What could explain if I eat French fries 6 hours a day and I never move from my couch? Tabi, ya Allah, what could explain why I got fat? Ya Allah, lesh, ya Allah, right? Okay, so it's the exact same principle. You don't need to be very educated or fancy to know that if you have people that come to your society that have a set of values, that some of them are beautiful. The hospitality of Arabic culture is gorgeous. The tight bonds that form in friendships in Arabic society is gorgeous. That's why when people ask me, what are you? My first answer is to say, I'm Lebanese. Because yes, of course, I'm Jewish, but also my ethnicity, my speaking is Arabic. When I do Leish Ya Allah, I just did. That's not a Jewish thing. That's an Arabic thing, yes? So there are many beautiful traits that come with the Muslim societies and Arabic cultures, but there are some really problematic ones. So if you're going to let in millions of people, then you have to ask yourself, are those people likely to assimilate within the foundational values of the West? Yes or no? There are no other possibilities. And now the politicians are finding out that, oops, I guess it was a wrong parasitic idea to think that all immigrants are equally likely to assimilate. But here's the problem, Sahar. We always say that the first step to recognizing the first step is to recognize that you have a problem. Yes, it is true, I am alcoholic. But of course, most people will deny that they are alcoholic. No, I don't have a problem with alcoholism. So the problem with the West is that while it sees the problem, it is absolutely hell-bent on not instituting a single autocorrective measure to fix the problem. This is why I have grown increasingly pessimistic about the capacity of the West to save itself. Because it would be one thing if you saw huge cataclysmic changes that are being implemented. I see the exact opposite, the doubling down of the suicidal empathy. So I think we're in for a very rough future ride.
How deep in do you think we are inside this problem? Do you think there's anything we can do right now, or do you think we've passed the point of return?
No, I mean, and I'm not trying to be falsely optimistic. I think that literally the problem could be solved by next Tuesday, but it would take a testicular fortitude that no Western leader has. Even someone as as much of an agent of change as a once in a multiple generation leader like Donald Trump hasn't done nearly enough as what you should have done, right? The fact that Dearborn, Michigan exists in its current form tells you that there is a major problem. The fact that Minneapolis exists in its current form, there are little towns in Maine, right? Maine is a 400 year settlements, villages of fishermen named John Smith and Joe Riley. You walk in them now in a small little village, it's Mogadishu. How is that possible? So, and again, does that mean that there aren't tons of beautiful, kind Somali people? Of course there are. But does it mean, though, that the fundamental organizing values of Somali culture are perfectly incongruent with those of the United States? Nothing could be clearer.
What makes the liberals and the left wingers of the world, which are at the opposite side of the spectrum, the opposite side of the spectrum, I mean, on ways of thinking, on belief systems, what makes them embrace the Islamic culture and the people who come from countries who have completely different values? What makes them accept them if they're here? And I mean, I'm trying to demonstrate exactly, like, they're two separate extremes, yet they resemble one another in a way that they completely forget that the other side would kill them in a second if they would have a chance. What makes them blind to this? Is it their kindness? Is it their weakness? Is it their white guilt? What is it exactly?
It's all those things and more. So I'll give a couple of answers. First answer, not as much related to my mechanisms of parasitic ideas as suicidal empathy, is one of pragmatism. The left, and certainly the extreme left, but the left in general and the socialists and the communists despise the West for their own reasons, right? The West is evil. The West engages in greedy capitalism. The West is selfish and brutish. Wouldn't it be much more beautiful if there weren't mean billionaires? Why does my good friend Elon Musk have more money in a day than most people will have in their entire life? That's not nice. That's not kind. Wouldn't it be nicer if we taxed him at 100% so it could be shared with everybody? It's a beautiful feeling. It's almost making me cry now to say it. It's so kind. It's so loving. So let's eradicate the West because of our own ideological commitments, which are socialism and communism and the utopia that comes with that. Now you've got Islam that also hates the West for its own reasons. And so let's get into bed together, because at the very least, we share a common disdain and hatred of the West. That's what's called the Red-Green Alliance, right? And so there is that pragmatic reason. And to your point, of course, the people with the blue hair who studied socialism at Columbia don't know that they're going to be killed next once the Islamists. By the way, I don't like to say Islamists because that makes it sound as though there is something separate. There is Islam and there is Islamism. There is no such thing. There is only Islam. Islamism is a predominant part of Islam. 90% of Islam is political Islam. A very small percentage is the spiritual part. So there is no Islamism in Islam. It's just Islam.
I look at Islamism as spreading Islam in a violent manner, whether it's preaching about it, whether it's spreading it by the sword, whether it's committing jihad. That's when I say Islamism. That's what I mean, and that's what I see other people say when they talk about Islamism. What do you refer to them as?
No, because I would slightly correct you, because the certainly the Muslim Brotherhood, but not only the Muslim Brotherhood, have recognized that they would never be successful if they try to implement their goal using your metric of violence, right? That's why, and I've said this many times on many high-profile shows, the Muslim Brotherhood has said that we are going to conquer the West through three means, none of which involve your violence. And surely you're not going to think that the Muslim Brotherhood are not Islamists. They said we're going to conquer the West through the womb of our women, right?
Children.
Right. We produce 5.2. You're too lazy and you produce 1.2. If we put it into the fertility calculation, inshallah, in 70 years, we flip you all. And they tell you this. I could show you a million clips where they say, here, you have the watches, but we have all the time in the world, as the Taliban used to say to the US soldiers, right? So you're playing a long game. It's not just tomorrow, right? So that's not through violence. Number two, we will conquer you through hijrah, through immigration. Well, how beautiful is it when we don't even have to worry about you putting any walls, because you're going to say, open door, yalla, millions come in, no problem. Angela Merkel, to your point, I feel guilty because my grandparents were Nazis and were really mean people. Let me now reverse that problem and expiate my guilt by letting in millions of people to demonstrate that I'm the exact opposite of my grandparents, who were really mean and didn't like people. I'm going to let in the noble people from Syria and Waziristan. They're going to contribute greatly to German society. Of course, there's a small problem, though. When I let in tons of Syrians and Iraqis and Yemeni and Afghans into German, then it becomes impossible for there to be German Jews in Germany. So I have replicated what my grandparents did. My grandparents took the Jews straight to the oven. I am much kinder. It will take it longer to now eradicate all the Jews from Germany, but it is really important to show that I'm not bigoted by letting in millions of people into my country. So number one, demography, fertility, womb of our women. Number two, hijrah. Number three, again, not violent, we will use your miserable freedoms against you. That's exactly what they do, right? You arrest someone who is Muslim for fraud, Social Security fraud. But why, Allah, why are you Islamophobic? Well, no, it's not because I'm Islamophobic. It's because you raped the girl that I arrested you, Muhammad, right? So they are using the Achilles heel of the West, which is individual rights, civil rights, dignity for all. And by the way, now I can't have these conversations in Arabic with those folks because they usually recognize me and they won't tell me the truth. But many years ago, when I wasn't as known and where they could speak to me in Arabic, unsure of who I am or what my religion is, they would all say all those things to me, right? Like, so for example, in Montreal, in Canada, and actually I discussed this in Suicidal Empathy, we have a healthcare card, right? It's free healthcare, but by free healthcare, it means that you steal several $100,000 of my income to give me free healthcare, which I have to wait 6 months to go see a doctor, but it's free. Just like, for example, if you don't count the fact that I paid $50,000 for my car, it was actually free. And if you don't count that when I went to the steakhouse, I paid $150 for my steak, it was free steak. So in Canada, we have free steaks if you don't count the fact that we pay for it. So it's the same thing with healthcare. It's completely free, other than the fact that you take 70% of my income, but it is free healthcare. Okay, so now why am I saying this? Because we used to have our health card, when we go to the hospital, we just give our card and we have the thing and you're done, right? That's how it's free. Well, that card didn't have your photo on it. Okay, so therefore, when Uncle Ahmed from Lebanon, from Baalbek, who has never set foot in Canada, wanted to have heart surgery, and he's not Canadian, he could take his nephew's card and then turn it, but we're too kind in Canada to check if the actual owner of that card, who is a Canadian citizen, is different from the guy who's never set foot in Canada. So they used to joke with me in Arabic that the entire country of Lebanon received free healthcare from Canada. And then eventually Canadians woke up and said, oops, I guess there's been, many billions of dollars of fraud. And so now we're going to put a photo so that we can establish. But it only took a few, billions of dollars of waste. But who cares? It's the taxpayer will pay it anyway. So I have a unique access to the mindset of those folks because I am of those folks. I grew up with those folks. I was educated with those folks. I speak that language, both the literal language and the cultural theory of mind language. So they used to all tell me the West is a woman to be mounted. And in Arabic, there's a very spicy way of saying that, right? Because the West is a woman waiting to be effed, right? It's weak, right? Empathy, kindness, compassion, those are feminine traits of kindness and tolerance. But as I explain also in Suicidal Empathy, let me give you a 5-sentence synopsis of history. You ready? There is a river, and there is a tribe on one side of the river, and there is another tribe on the other side of the river. The men on each side of the river are looking at the resources of the tribes on the other side and saying, I really want to get that. There are some really pretty girls that I would like to bring into my side. There is some really good protein, animal protein there that we don't have, whatever the resource is. I'm going to go and take it. No, wait a minute. I better not, because on the other side, there are men who are equally violent, equally aggressive, and equally territorial that are not going to take it too well if you try to do this to us. Now, sometimes these two tribes look at each other and say, I better not do anything. And other times they say, you know what? I think I could take those guys on the other side. And then we go to war. I just explained the entire history of humanity with this river metaphor, right? Well, imagine if the two sides of the river are now, on the one side is beautiful, noble, peaceful Islam. On the other side is perfectly, completely castrated men called Western man, no testicles, no spine, completely ideologically parasitized by every single non-survival reflex that is imaginable. It's not going to end well. So, can it still be flipped? Yes. Do I see any evidence of it being flipped? No.
You talked about the term Islamophobia 4 minutes ago, and you said that this is a tool being used by the Muslim Brotherhood. What do you mean by that? Because we all know that phobia means irrational fear. If I fear the lights in my room, that's a phobia. If I fear my water bottle right here, that's a phobia because it's an irrational fear. It's got no grounds to it. Why do they use the term Islamophobia? And does this term actually exist?
Right, because they are exactly the opposite of what you said earlier about Israel not being able to win the propaganda war. They are super smart. The Israelis are super dumb. I'm sorry to say, right? Because and of course, I don't literally mean it in every.
Of course you don't. People understand your sarcasm, Gad. Don't worry.
Okay, good. Okay, good. But by the way, you're overestimating how intelligent people are, because just yesterday I put out a clip where I went on and I said, "Oh, I just heard of the Afghan terror attack where he shot 2 people, and I'm devastated by the fact that this is going to result in an increase in Islamophobia." Now, most people understood that I was being sarcastic, but many people started sending me death threats, not knowing that I was being sarcastic. So don't overestimate people's stupidity. But in any case, Islamophobia is the brilliant understanding of those folks of where the weakness points of the West is, right? Imagine if I've been able to convince Western people that the greatest moral transgression, the greatest moral, ethical, and legal transgression that you could commit? Oh, is it pedophilia? No. Is it murder? No. Is it rape of an adult woman? No. There is nothing worse than being called bigoted, transphobic, racist, sexist. But amongst those, there is nothing worse than being hateful towards Islam. So, therefore, I have now rendered you impotent to invoke your survival instinct, right? Because I get people who write to me and say, but I keep getting sexually harassed by Muslim men, Dr. Saad, but I know that it's wrong of me to think that they're dangerous. Really? So you're a woman, you're walking on the street, your basal instinct of being fearful of being raped is coming from those men. There is a statistical regularity to what you're facing, but you're writing to me and saying, Dr. Saad, am I a bad person for thinking that they're dangerous? Well, by the way, I even have a worse story than that for you.
Please.
Norwegian man is sodomized by a Somali. He's raped. A man is raped by another man. The Somali is put for a very short sentence, 2-3 years in prison, because the Norwegians are very kind.
Of course.
They don't believe in the penal system and criminal thing, because he probably had a tough childhood. That's why he ended up sodomizing the other guy. So you have to be understanding. After he finished his prison sentence, he was going to be deported back to Mogadishu. The guy whom he had raped felt incredibly bad, incredibly guilty, because now Ahmad, who raped him in his ass, is not going to be able to maximally flourish and live a full life in Mogadishu. He's not going to be, Sahar, stop being such a racist. He's not going to be able to be fully self-actualized the way Abraham Maslow told us to be. We have to try to maximally flourish, right? In Norway, the sodomizer had opportunities. In Mogadishu, he's not. So he came out and said that he felt very bad about it. Well, I'm here to tell you that we did not evolve the emotional system to feel empathy for our rapists. But if I have been parasitized to actually believe that the greatest crime I could commit is to be Islamophobic, of course, which is a term that is nonsensical, then guess what? When you rape me and your name is Muhammad, I go, thank you for that surprise lovemaking session. I am thankful for it. But this is why I use the framework of neuroparasitology, why I use suicidal empathy. And that's why, I mean, forgive me for being immodest, why it has captured the imagination of the world, because I truly think that it's not because it had to be Gad Saad, evolutionary psychologist, to come up with this. Okay, that helps. But it also had to be Gad Saad with my own background, because I understand your games. Right? You know who else understands those games? Mossab, from the son
Hassan
of
Youssef.
Mossab, Yosef Hussein or Hussein Yusuf?
Mossab Hassan Youssef.
Yusuf, right, who's been on my show. We've become friendly. When you hear him speak, to me, it's music to my ears, because I understand his exasperation, his frustration when he speaks and points to some, Western woman who's wearing the keffiyeh and he goes, "You know nothing. You're stupid." I understand that because he comes from that world and he can't believe. By the way, he doesn't understand Islam, but Karen Keffiyeh, who was born in Iowa, doesn't speak Arabic, but took an Islamic studies course at Oberlin College, will explain to Mossab what true Islam is. That's why the West is dying.
It's just like people who live in the West who try to teach me what being a Jew is like or what being an Israeli is like. It's the same thing. But I have to ask you a personal question because I am interested. I do get life death threats as well for what I do, for the stuff that I expose. I went to a Muslim town in England called Whitechapel to show the Islamization of the town, which used to be predominantly Jewish, and now it's predominantly Bangladeshi, Bengali, which did not feel like the UK, by the way. But after I released this video, people started saying, now I'm sure you hate Muslims. I'm sure you despise them. I'm sure you think that they are monsters and creatures. And I started getting death threats, and I got emails saying you need to be concerned about your safety because we're coming to your house. Make sure you get a weapon, like crazy stuff that I want to know what it's like for you dealing with this on a daily basis when you have family, when you have kids. What is it like for you dealing with these constant death threats? Were you ever told by your family, by your wife, I don't know, your marital situation, you need to stop? Because I'm getting the same thing from my wife right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think on a few occasions she hinted at that, but I always remind her that one of the reasons I think she loves me and admires me is exactly then the reasons why you're telling me to not be who I am. So, sometimes you have to take the good with the bad, and that you love my courage, you love that I'm a very principled person, that I'm a very truthful person. Yes, of course, you also have to be pragmatic. You don't want to be a reckless martyr. But that's why, by the way, I do I have a very strong discipline. If you look, you don't know you've never seen a photo of my wife. As a matter of fact, usually when someone meets me at an event where, I know that it's safe and so on, and they meet my wife, they usually will say, "Oh, I recognized you because your husband will often put photos of the back of your hair. She has very big, beautiful, curly hair." And that's the only thing that anyone's ever seen of her.
The
People
same
don't
happened
know.
to me. The same happened to me. I did a debate with a big streamer. His name is Hamza, and people heard my wife, the voice, and then they heard her. I went to an event. They heard her voice. They said, "This is the voice. This is the voice of the woman who debated Hamza." Crazy, exactly the same. But people also they don't know what she looks like because I keep her safe.
Exactly. And so I never, I might say, "Oh, I was out with this child of mine here," but you never, you don't know their name, you don't know who they are. Uh, Actually, the thing that often worries me the most, never mind the death threats and so on, is that people come up and they want to. It's very nice. They want to take a picture with you and so on. I always am worried that someone's going to take a photo while I'm with my family and then post it. So usually, if I see them do that, I'll go up. I mean, politely but aggressively, and say, "Don't post this anywhere." And then they always. So I've never had a problem, but I'm very, very careful with these kinds of things. Yes.
Beautiful. I would like to end by asking this. Where can people find your books? What website should they go to? I want to include it in the link below because I do think you're incredible. I want people to be exposed to your books. I'm pretty sure a lot more people will know who you are. I already know this, but I just want to, I want you to be able to promote your stuff in 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute, whatever you want.
Okay. Thank you for that. So my books are available everywhere. You could go on Amazon. You can go directly to the publisher. My earlier books were all in evolutionary psychology. How do you apply evolutionary psychology to study human behavior? Then I transitioned into writing The Parasitic Mind. Then after that was a book on happiness. I don't know if you could see it here. It's
The green one or the one next to it?
the one next to it, this one. This is called The Saad, SAAD, The Sad Truth About Happiness. 8 Secrets for Leading the Good Life. The reason, by the way, why I wrote that book, I had no intention of writing a happiness book, but I kept getting emails from thousands of people saying, "What's your secret? How come you always tackle such difficult subjects, but you're always joking around and you have a very good sense of humor? What's your secret to being happy?" So I said, okay, well, Maybe I'll write a book about it. And then my forthcoming book, Suicidal Empathy, should be available to pre-order probably in the next month or so. It's actually, if I can do sort of a promotional thing,
Please.
it really is important for people to pre-order the book. Let me explain why. Because when you pre-order the book, the day that the book is actually released, let's say 10,000 people pre-order the book. The day that it is released, it's as if those 10,000, the sale happened on the day of the release. So then it enters very quickly the bestsellers list, and then that becomes an avalanche. So it actually is really important to pre-order the book. And so it'll probably be available in the next month or two. I have a show called The Sad Truth, SAAD. I'm one of, now everybody and their mother has a podcast, but I was one of the original ones. Certainly, probably the first professor to have such a show. It's been about 11 years now, 12 years, where I invite all sorts of people, not unlike how we're having a conversation now. So you could go back probably to almost 2,000 episodes that you could watch and listen to. You could follow me on social media, Gad Saad, Gad Saad. So there are many ways that you could touch base with me. And even emails, although I can't anymore respond to the emails just because literally I would spend all day doing nothing but that. I literally try to read every single email that's sent to me. So get in touch, and thank you for your support.
Gad Saad, thank you so much for joining me today. I will include all the information down below so you can be connected to his information, his book, his show, his books, and his show. Gad, thank you for being here.
Shukran, Habibi. Thank you.
If you'd like to watch more of my stuff, please check out my channel down below. If you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that notification button so you can be notified every time I upload new content. If you'd like to support me and the channel financially, you can do that using Buy Me Coffee or Patreon down in the links below. Also, we now have a Discord that you can join down in the link below. And now you can become a YouTube member and enjoy specific YouTube perks. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.